You got some beach ball sized lady nuts coming in all kamikaze like that. Well, shucks, I do believe we're going to be going to bat swinging as we have a look at the Threezero release of the Walking Dead Negan 6-scale figure. First, I'd like to thank the folks over at Threezero for making this review possible. Let's grab the new tape measure and figure out how tall Negan stands, starting at the bottom, working our way up to the top of his head. There we go. The figure is 12.3 inches. Now, those who go by measurements in centimeters, let's switch it over to centimeters, the figure stands at 31.3 centimeters in height. Let's first have a look at Negan's accessories, and then we'll have a look at the figure itself. First things first, he does come included with a Colt 1911 with a detachable magazine. When you do get out of packaging, the magazine is a separate piece, and I've already gone ahead and added it to the handle. It is a little on the trickier side to get in there and pop it out. You do probably use a little bit of a longer nail to do so. Not that you would likely be taking magazines out that often, but I like the fact that they've actually given you a standalone magazine painted. Otherwise, silver, other than really the black portion there covered, and that's going to face, that's going to be on the end of the handle. They've sculpted the very first bullet in the chamber and painted it in a nice metallic gold, and then you can go ahead and fit the magazine back into the handle portion. The gun has a natural and a good amount of scratching and wear away to it. I do like that the Colt also does have a firing back to it as well. And they've painted the internal chamber in silver, as well as the trigger in the actual handle. The trigger on the gun there as well has been painted in silver. A nice wood effect has been added to the handle. They've even gone as far as to paint the rivet portions, the parts that would have attached the wood to the Colt, to the actual handgun. So a really fantastic work. And that's really just the pistol. We're going to look at a whole lot more, but definitely a good starting point here. One of the smallest and definitely one of the more interesting things, Negan also comes included with a marker pen. Getting this initially out of packaging, I thought it was a cigarette, and ideally I would like to rather use it for more so a cigarette than I would like to use it for a marker pen. But you can see that they've even painted the end of it as a workable pen. Obviously it doesn't really work. It's again a very interesting added accessory. Because again, I would not probably have gone this route. I would have probably likely given him like a cigarette instead. But it's something that you could easily hold in his hand. I'll show you that in a second. Negan comes also included with an axe, which I believe is the same axe that we also got with the Curse of Michael Myers 6-scale figure release that also was included and also shipped from Threezero. The axe there's not really a whole lot of paint happening to it. It's almost more of a bleached wood than a darker wood that what we will see in a second on Lucille. The edge The bladed edge is not sharp, although the end pieces do feel like they have a little bit more of a pointedness to it. There's no blood on it just yet. Again, I do feel like this was included with the Michael Myers. Certainly something that could also be included if you want to display it with Rick Grimes, which I probably would go the route more so, just because, well, we don't want Lucille to feel jealous. Which is the best way to introduce then Lucille. He gets actually 2 versions of Lucille, which is really interesting. Initially, I sort of thought that Lucille here came in 2 versions, kind of the pre-barbed wire look, and then the post-barbed wire, I'm going to smash somebody's head in look. You can see that the differencing between the two, this Lucille that has already the molded barbed wire is of a darker nature. It's got a little bit more of a darker stain to it, and they've added some more wood grains to it. This one remains rather untouched, both in the paint, while it still has a fantastic wood grain look to it. Obviously, it doesn't have as much to the level of what we are getting here. This one is definitely more stained. Likely stained with brains, blood, and guts, and all that other good stuff. Definitely would look as to why this one would be a slightly darker shade. But what's interesting though about this bat, if we take this Lucille just for a quick second and look at all the cool sculpted barbed wire on there, you can even make out that there's a little bit of blood, a little few droplets and dollops of blood added in there as well. I'd love to see them have released a 3rd version of Lucille, which would have been heavily blood soaked. This could easily be accomplished by simply just going in there with like a red Sharpie and adding some additional coloring to it. I may consider doing that. In the meantime, I do really like the look of this. But let's talk a little bit about this Lucille. Included along with it, you get yourself your own wire. Yes, in fact, you could do it yourself, as it does come with a do-it-yourself Lucille bat. You simply just have to unravel this, which I haven't done yet. I wanted to keep it for the purpose of this review just to show you how it comes out of packaging. But essentially you would be wrapping it around Lucille, creating your own look. The only thing that this look doesn't have though, is it doesn't have the little bird parts that would make up the barbed wire. Instead, simply what it is just it's just metallic wiring. So if you put it around Lucille, it is going to be missing, unfortunately, some of the little knotted areas that barbed wire is known for. A nice touch, though, by Threezero to actually include options to make your very own Lucille wrappings. Negan will also come with a series of interchangeable hands. Now, I do think that he does actually come with one other hand, but I did notice when I got it out of packaging that the section in which held the extra fist, I think was actually empty, so I think I'm missing one of the hands. He has 3 gloved hands. One is more of a relaxed palm, which I just so happen to have currently with a peg stuck in there. And then he also has kind of a relaxed, slightly gripping hand. And then he has one for a trigger hand. I'll show you that in a second. And then on the more exposed skin hands, he's got the fist, and he's also got a gripping hand. So I think the only one that was actually missing from the gloves, from the hands that I've received, was the gripped hand, the actual closed fist, which is perfectly fine because I really would never display Negan with a closed fist. It would essentially, I believe it would just be this hand, but it would be the gloved version of it, which is, again, okay, but I just never display figures with closed fists. Which then brings us to the 6-scale figure release of Negan here. Dressed head to toe in show-accurate attire, Negan is wearing his larger boots with a buckle on the side. Now, it's not a real functioning buckle. Instead, it's actually molded into the boot as well as the side buckle here has also been molded into the boot. The boot is slightly oversized as it was in the show itself. Imagining the fact that Negan would have been finding his clothing, it would make perfect sense that things such as boots would be slightly oversized on some of these characters. You flip the boot upside down, and a very pleasant surprise, you get yourself the Threezero stamping on the underside, which is I believe they always find places where they can put the little logo there underneath. The boots are dirty, the boots are grimy. Obviously, there is some excessive wear that's added to the boots itself. I got just a little bit of hair there. The boots are a softer plastic, almost even borderlining a rubber here. Even like the actual footing, which normally you would almost expect this to be a denser plastic and up here be softer. Even this as well is softer. It's hard to even think that there is a foot in there. In fact, the more I squeeze the boot, the more I think that there isn't any foot present inside. Instead, it looks like it's pegged only here, right here, which is the densest part of the boot, whereas this part here and the part up at the top here is remaining a softer rubber. You know, part of me was actually going to look at the rest of his outfit, but then it dawned on me we should really look at the strongest aspect of this 6-scale figure release, and that is the perfect, spot-on, television-accurate head sculpt here of actor Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who very viciously portrays Negan in Walking Dead. I love his portrayal of Negan. I can't really think of any other actor that could have done justice to him. I know there was talks of other characters, other actors that would have donned essentially the suit and the collar of Negan, but I'm really glad that they did go with Jeffrey Dean Morgan. And to Threezero's credit, I mean, I can't think of a better head sculpt that I've seen from their releases than this one right here. This was the reasoning why I wanted to get this particular figure. They've done an excellent job of mixing the darker shades of his facial hair along with the lighter shades. As Negan's beard fully grows out in the show, you definitely see a lot more of the whites and the grays in his beard. And I think that's been presented here extremely well in his facial hair, even in his mustache, which is the two areas in which the Negan character doesn't really have the darker hair. The only hairs that he actually has dark, and obviously he's dyeing for the show itself, is the top area of his hair. Now, I think Threezero actually, to their credit, have given him a little bit fuller of a hair than what he actually sports in the show. In the show, the actor is slightly a little bit more thinner on the top area here, so instead of that, they've given him a slightly more fuller hairstyle, and it definitely does look like him from the show itself. You've got the individual wrinkles, the darker areas around the recessed sections of the eye where the eyelids are showing. The eyes do have a slight reflection to them. They have not been painted that. Rather, instead, the lighting actually does a great job of just bouncing off of those eyeballs, giving that little bit of reflection and giving a whole lot of life to the face. I mean, now that they've perfected this head sculpt, what I would love to see them do is just remold this, tweak it ever so slightly to maybe give us versions of Negan's head sculpt in which he didn't necessarily have the beard, maybe just stubble, and a few moments in which he kind of had slightly more draping, rougher hair, something that wasn't as slicked back. But they've definitely nailed the likeness here. It is probably one of the best head sculpts that I've seen released from them. One of the obvious comparisons we can also make is the previously released Threezero Walking Dead Rick Grimes. Now, I did like this figure, but I did think that the head sculpt needed slight tweaking, especially around the lip area, which shaded too close to the facial hair that he was sporting. Seeing how good now they've handled Negan, I would really like to see them take, no pun intended, a stab again at a new Rick Grimes, maybe with a blue collared shirt and a different head sculpt. But there you have the two figures side by side, a perfect foil really for Negan and vice versa. The two characters look great side by side. So let's resume with the rest of the figure here. Of course, for his outfit, Negan is sporting his trademark leather jacket and his red scarf, something which he doesn't really wear for the rest of the series. It seems he only really has it in the first few episodes in which he debuts. Don't worry, the scarf is removable. I'll show you that in a second, but I just want to show you the close-up here on his leather jacket. It's very accurate to the way it looks in the show itself. So multiple zippers that are actually functioning zippers. You can open and close those. Right down to the main zipper, if you will, can open and close. Now, Negan, over the course of his different looks in the show, even at a few episodes, he's not even wearing this. He's just wearing the white top. I feel I would be doing him a disservice. You could theoretically take this off and just display him really with the white shirt underneath, but I feel like that is a disservice to the character. If anything, I would likely keep the leather jacket on him, and if anything, I would probably remove the scarf. Now, I've already taken the scarf off one time before, and I have to admit it is a little on the trickier side to kind of get it back around. Really, all it is you can take the scarf off just like this and leave it off in its entirety. Now, there is no real right or wrong way to rewrap it around his neck. I sort of just kind of started on one point and then worked my way around. And then when I got wrapped around his neck, I think 2 or 3 times, I just kind of readjusted it so the thicker portions of this beautiful cranberry colored scarf was a little broader on the front of him versus the back of him. And then after that, I just sort of tucked it in between his, inside his leather jacket collar there. Again, I do like the scarf. If you're a purist, I suppose you could just have him likely displayed with the scarf, but I like that it's a component that you can remove from the figure. Being that Negan sort of doesn't really wear the scarf for the rest of the series, I'll probably be inclined just to display him like this, the white shirt underneath, and then the leather jacket over top of that. Of course, the one side he's got his glove there. It's actually, I just want to show you as well, if I can just move the zipper up here on Negan's jacket. The shirt also isn't a short sleeve, rather it's a long sleeve shirt, so you just might want to factor that in as well as an option for displaying him just with the shirt. Again, he's got the bare hand on the one side, the gloved hand on the other. This so happens to be the gripping hand, suited for holding Lucille or suited for holding the Colt. Then for his pants, we move further down. Sort of a khaki, almost brownish green colored pant, closer almost even more brown. And then he's got 2 belts. One belt keeps his pants in place. As you can see, they are fed through the looplets there on the pants themselves. And then he's got a secondary belt for housing the bullets. Now, he doesn't come with any bullets or anything like that, but they've stitched the individual looplets there, that if you had bullets, they would theoretically go in there. This sits a little on the looser side, as it does in the show itself. It does loop through one of the loops of his main belt here. It kind of just feeds its way through there. Negan does have functioning pockets both on the front and as well on the back. I dare also bring this to your attention as well. He does sort of have a flat behind. But unfortunately, Jeffrey also has a flat behind in the show, so I think there's a little bit of accuracy also there as well. Whether you display Negan with his cranberry crimson scarf or you leave it off altogether, I feel like I'm gravitating a little bit more towards displaying him without it, just because in the majority of the series up to where we've left him off, he pretty much is wearing it without the scarf, the look of just having him with the leather jacket and the t-shirt underneath. But he shows extremely well, especially when you've got Lucille, his trusty gal, if you will, draped over his shoulders. A couple of different ways that you can, of course, display him. Probably even just display him like that. Or you can have the very iconic look where he's pointing the bat, picking out who he's going to be picking off at the beginning of the show. Again, Negan looks exceptional here in 6 scale form. For Negan's posability. Now, here's one thing. He does have a bowl joint, but the neck as well as the head are one piece. This is smart in the sense that it keeps the sculpt consistent, that the head doesn't look like a separate piece from the neck. The only detriment to that, though, is I would really like to be able to kind of slightly tip Negan's head to the side, give him that slightly kind of arrogant, cocky tilt that he's done with his head sculpt. And it only really is all controlled by his neck. So, I mean, you can angle it left and right, but he doesn't have any sort of secondary bowl joint right there. I kind of wish he did, but I can understand the reasoning why, because they obviously didn't want to break up the head sculpt between the head and the neck. A lot of companies actually favor going with one headpiece with neck piece together because, again, it looks a little bit more seamless. It's definitely more of one of the more seamless looking figures because you really don't see any of the joints here on him. A lot of it is concealed underneath his clothing, so it does look a little bit more accurate than having a big noticeable cut between the neck and the head socket. So again, based on that, Negan's head rotates all the way around. You can hinge it up and down, and you can angle it back and forth. His arms hinge outward, not restricted at all, luckily, because of the leather that they use, the faux leather, is thin enough as well as the material underneath. So you get a good range of motion forward and back. Of course, to be expected, the more you move it forward, it does tighten around the shoulder area, making it a little bit more difficult for his arms to move forward and back. But they do move out very easily, no problems whatsoever there. He has a swivel on the bicep. He has what seems to be a double hinge on the elbow, or a very generous single hinge on the elbow, and then he also has rotation and hinge in his hand. For Negan's waist, he does have a lower crunch on his torso, allows you to angle it back and forth. And then he also has a swivel on the lower waist. Legs split out, as well as he has top swivel cut on the thigh, double hinge on the knee, swivel on the boot, and then he also has independent hinge in the foot section here. This is smart because we looked at this before. This section here feels like a denser plastic, so there's probably a ball joint on the top, and there's probably a ball joint on the bottom, giving you separate independent hinging on the foot portion, completely and independently separate from the higher area of the boot. Very smart that they did this the way that they did. Just a little part of the video I want to tack on to the end. I had mentioned during the review that I didn't get an extra hand. It was either a closed fist or it was a fist that was suited for holding Lucille a little bit better. Sure enough, after the review was shot, I was just kind of packing up stuff and I found that the hand had fallen out. So during the course of this review, I mentioned that I didn't think I got an extra hand. It turns out that an extra hand was there. It just fell out of packaging. So if anybody was wondering that Threezero didn't include that extra hand, sure enough, they did. I couldn't be any bit happier with Threezero's release of the Walking Dead Negan in 6-scale figure form. Admittingly, when I first saw images of the figure online, I did think that the likeness to actor Jeffrey Dean Morgan seemed slightly off. Something didn't seem like it was all there. I don't know if they've gone back and retooled the head, because I feel like the head looks better on the figure in physical form than it did online. The added bonus is the fact that you do have the do-it-yourself Lucille, which I do feel could have been a little bit better if they had put the knots in the wiring, so it did actually look like barbed wire and not so much just wire on its own. But it's a nice little bonus added touch Threezero didn't necessarily have to include, but it's kind of nice that you can really make your own Lucille. All the accessories make sense to the figure. The figure as a whole looks great. The costume looks very accurate to the way he did in the series. And myself, just my own personal preference, even though I would likely remove the scarf, so as what you're seeing here in final looks is probably going to be the way I'm going to be displaying the figure, I like that the option is there that you could take the scarf off or you could leave it on depending on what you consider to be your Negan. Speaking of your Negan, if you're interested in picking this one up for yourself, the price point on this, like all the other Threezero releases, it's extremely affordable. You're looking at about a $168, little below a $170 US dollar figure. Now for Canada, I think the conversion rate works out to be about $220, $230 after the exchange rate. But that's still a really affordable figure when you think of the market, the broad spectrum of 6-scale figure companies out there. Threezero are producing one of the better sculpted figures and also one of the more affordable figures. The fact that you could pick up Negan for under $170 is pretty good. The hard part, though, is Negan's a little harder to get. If, for example, you're looking to source him out on Sideshow Collectibles, I think currently he's sold out. So getting this guy might be a little bit harder to do so, but I definitely think if you're a fan of Walking Dead, and specifically Negan, this is a must-have added piece that you want to have to your collection. Today, though, we were having a look at the Threezero Walking Dead Negan 6-scale figure release. Fantastic looking figure. If you guys haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, make sure you do so. If you also want to go back and have a look at some of the other Threezero figure reviews that I've done, don't worry, there's a playlist specifically for Threezero. We're going to be having a look at some other upcoming releases from that same company, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.